Tobago. Now, during the last Take a Stand segment on I-95, for whatever reason, the first part of that installment was cut off. And I felt that it's so important, the issues that were dealt with in that first part, that I decided to redo this video so that we can share with Trinidad and Tobago our point of view and how we see and view the current state of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, there is so much to discuss about the state of our beloved country, this republic, that it's so easy to get distracted from our own message. It's also easy to get sidetracked from some of the more fundamental issues that lie under all these stories. Of course, as we try to wrap our heads around the political drama, which of course is never ever short in Trinidad and Tobago, whilst we try to wrap our heads around that, we still have many thousands of ordinary working people still have to get through the day, just trying to make ends meet, just trying to survive. So I want to start off really and truly dealing with the successful Labor Day celebrations and some of the fundamental issues that were raised on that platform. And I'll try to do that in this short space of time. And one such issue had to do with changing the system of governance. Now, here's a quote from the Labor Day feature address by Comrade Ansel Rocher, President General of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union and President of the Joint Trade Union Movement. And I will quote a bit from that feature address because it is critical for Trinidad and Tobago to understand the perspective of labor and the working class analysis of our society. So let me start off by quoting. And he said, "Today we are definitely in challenging times, brought on not by us, the poor and ordinary working people, but by those who are prepared to use the current system of governance to their absolute benefit at the expense of others." Now, this current system of governance was never designed to protect the poor and the oppressed. And therefore, as the labor movement, the conscience of the people, we have absolutely no intention to give up our struggle for revolutionary change. So two things, end quote, two things coming out of that statement. Firstly, that the poor and ordinary working people of this country did not, I repeat, did not create the current economic situation. That was not done by poor ordinary persons, okay? And secondly, so firstly, the poor and ordinary working people did not create the challenging times. And secondly, the current system of governance, the one that we are grappling with, was not designed to protect the poor and the oppressed. So those are two key points. A third thing, I want to add a third thing, which is that you have a movement that is making a clear statement that it must not, cannot, and will not, and have absolutely no intentions to give up the struggle for revolutionary change. And I want to go on and quote so that we are clear what exactly is the struggle about. And I quote, again from the Labor Day feature address by Comrade Roger. "The struggle must be for a new system of governance, as the current system has failed the masses time and time again. Evidently, what is even worse is that we now have people who just cannot govern the country properly. So from independence, the same oppressive system of governance was used by successive governments in the interests of the elites against the interests of working people and the poor." End quote. Now, this was such a key message, such a fundamental message coming out of Labor Day 2017, because it brings into focus the fact that Trinidad and Tobago itself is an unfinished project. We have in place this post-colonial state structure and all its institutions, which institutions are clearly not working for ordinary people. These institutions have failed, they've collapsed, and worse, they're definitely not helping and or supporting ordinary working people. But interestingly enough, the speech went on to talk about this state structure, or the way the society itself is structured as it relates to the elites in our country. All right? And I want to quote, the elites in our society, the planter class, descendants of plantation owners, now joined by the new capitalist class, in this system of governance, they do not have to struggle for anything. In fact, they simply raise prices without raising a finger or without any negotiations. They view the rest of us as nothing but beasts of burdens, and that they must extract as much social wealth from us as they can. In this last period, they have become even more emboldened with an interesting point. They have become even more emboldened with the rise of right-wing nationalism with Brexit and with the election of Donald Trump. Now, this particular speech was delivered on June 19th. This was before the airing of the Boudin's famous clip or famous documentary, Parts Unknown, about Trinidad and Tobago on CNN. In other words, the benefits, the current economic crisis benefits only one group of people. And we're suggesting that that group of people are the elites in Trinidad and Tobago. And listen to this part as I go on and continue to quote. Like back on the plantation, you must simply accept disrespect and attack on human dignity without complaint. And when the industrial court dispenses justice for workers, they, the elites, they are vexed with the court. These are the same elites and planter class who stand to gain from the current economic situation and present system of governance. They are making it very clear that they have absolutely no intention of sharing the burden of adjustment. And that is it. They are making it clear they have no intention to share the burden of adjustment. The only people who have to bear the cross, the only group in our society who have to carry this burden are working, ordinary people. Now, whilst the Minister of Finance and the government crying doom and gloom, here's the interesting part. They are crying doom and gloom, which picture is painted for poor and working people. But guess what? Who is absolutely unaffected by this doom and gloom and who seem to be having a boom instead are the elites and big business. Listen to the statistics that came out on that Labor Day feature address by Comrade Roger. Here it is, and I quote, "Just take a look at the annual reports for some of these same businesses. Massey Group in its 2016 annual report stated its revenue went from 9.1 billion in 2012 to 11.5 billion in 2016. The Guardian Group in their annual statement reported that revenue went up from 4.8 billion in 2014 to 5.4 billion in 2015. The Answer McCall Group, yes, I think we all know about this group. This is the group that has at its helm those who claim to be the most powerful in this country. So the Answer McCall Group also benefiting tremendously in these so-called hard times where we are told that the country has no money. Their annual report stated that operating profits surpassed $1 billion for 6 consecutive years. Yet that same Answer McCall Group, in terms of its Guardian, one of its subsidiary, Guardian Media Group, sending home 73 workers. So on one hand, you can boast of 1 billion operating profits, surpass, so we're not sure if it's 1 billion and a dollar or whether it's 1.9 billion, all right, but it surpassed 1 billion for six consecutive years, yet still you're sending home 73 workers from one of the subsidiaries. The speech went on to also highlight the banks being no different. And here's what the Labor Day speech by Comrade Roger, this is what it had. The banks, whilst they continue to impose all manner of charges on the poor customers, let's look at their report. For the year ended September 2016, Republic Bank Limited has recorded after-tax profit of $943 million. Scotiabank's after-tax profit for the quarter ended 31st of January 2017 was $170 million, an increase of $13 million or 8% over the comparative period in 2016. Republic Financial Holdings, RFHL, has reported profits of $630.5 million for the year ended March 31st, 2017. And you are telling workers that the country has no money. And interestingly, Comrade Roger went on to point out a number of interesting development by big business. Pennywise, who opened a massive super center in La Romaine. South Park in Tarouba continued to be expanded. Supermassive warehouse for private business interests being constructed in Freeport. Then you have Wendy's, Starbucks, Chuck E. Cheese, and of course recently this internationally renowned high-end furniture chain, Ashley Furniture, well established in the same country. Now, while the country seemed to have no money for workers, it is clear that it has lots of money for big business. And one of the things that he went on to point out is that it is sad, it is so sad that even us, ordinary working people, actually fall for the old talk, that the country don't have money, and and here's the key, and that there is no choice but for workers to go home. No choice but for workers to be retrenched. Even though the labor movement presented to the Minister of Finance Labor's economic alternative plan, which was meant to be the opposite to austerity, which is what we are seeing now with the mass retrenchments and so on, but that there would be a radical stimuli of the economy to get the economy growing, and at the same time having various sectors share the burden of adjustment. But that was not selected. Instead, what was chosen for this country is the usual road and path of IMF, World Bank. Well, interestingly enough, the Labor Day platform made it clear that there was absolutely no intention to remain silent whilst a few people enjoy all the wealth, and the rest of us have to simply suffer. So whilst big business continues to declare, according to that speech, whilst big business continues to declare huge billion-dollar profits, in the same country, thousands of workers are being placed on the breadline every day. Now, end quote. Let me be clear. The issue is not that these companies should not be profitable. The issue is the contradiction that as a small group amass huge fortunes, a large section of ordinary working people are made to suffer the indignity of losing their jobs and not being able to provide for their family. The other interesting thing to note is that small and even to some extent medium-sized businesses are also feeling the pinch, where you have many small businesses closing shop, and so more workers losing their jobs. In this so-called hard times, what we have in fact is big business booming while small businesses and ordinary working people suffering. Trinidad and Tobago, we have in fact constructed a society where many have come to believe that workers are insignificant, that poor, ordinary working people are insignificant, and that their lives and their livelihood do not matter. This has become the nature of our society, where some people count and other people don't. The lives of ordinary working people, their inhumane experiences are devoid of rights, and they are but shadows that seem to have no bearing or meaning for the ruling elites and the business elites. They are just inputs in the process of production, human resources to be used at the whims and fancy of business. And this is why it seems acceptable that in a difficult time, the only group that have to bear the burden of adjustment are workers. The discussion of productivity is not based really on the collective aspiration of a society, they keep talking about they keep bringing up the issue of productivity. But the issue of productivity is not based on the collective aspirations of a society, which is essentially built upon an understanding that all people count. So long as there's inequality, inequity, and injustice, so long as those things exist, and they do exist, when you consider the lives of ordinary people in Trinidad and Tobago, they do exist. These inequality, inequity, and injustice, we have to admit, exist right now in our post-colonial state. There are few institutions that stands by the vision and dreams of those bold and courageous workers some 80 years ago in 1937, who chose to take a stand, a real serious stand, against imperialism, against colonialism, against oppression, against inequality, against inequity, against injustice, to construct a society, a totally different society, a society where all our citizens count, where all our citizens can have a decent standard of living, and that you don't have the elite class amassing huge amount of wealth at the expense of ordinary working people. The construction of an alternative will require us surrendering some previous conceptions and prejudices regarding alternatives. In other words, we have to rethink how we understand what an alternative construct of a society could look like. And we have to be bold and brave to have that vision and to have that new idea as we begin the process of reconstructing Trinidad and Tobago. We need to set out principles by which we can reconstruct and reorganize our society, which is, and of course, based on our own peculiar historical development. But in the end, Trinidad and Tobago, why I really wanted to share this piece with you has to do with that contradiction, that you have a few benefiting from the resources of this country, and the many continue to suffer every single day. And the only way we can resolve that contradiction is if we are willing to sacrifice and bring about truly revolutionary change in this country and change our system of governance. Thank you, Trinidad and Tobago, for listening to me, and join me again next week, Monday at 1:35 on I-95 for Take a Stand for Trinidad and Tobago.